not sure. Is mine on? Oh, this button's red. Great. You want to just start? I do.
Good morning, everybody. Modzuka Banji. Oh, come on, you can say it. Modzuka Banji. There you go. Okay, so that's a greeting from Malawi. First of all, I want to thank everybody for your support and your prayers. We had a fabulous trip, and without everything that has come from all of you and God, there's no way any of this would have been possible. So we're so thankful. We still, when I start to tell the story to people, I have to say to them it's a God thing, because there's no other explanation for how any of this could have come about. But first and foremost, I want to send you all a greeting from everyone in Go-Go Village, because as we arrived and were blessed in being there and greeted by them, the pure joy in them and through them and with them, knowing that you sent their greetings to them, was the most beautiful thing ever. That they just couldn't imagine that from halfway across the world that all of this love and outpouring is coming from you, from people that they don't know, that they've never met. So that was the most wonderful thing. This is not my favorite place to be. So Pete, who really does enjoy it up here, I'm going to interject when needed, but I just wanted to say hello from all of them and to let you know that they are so very, very grateful for what God has done in their life, and that they truly feel that they have friendship from halfway across the world, and how much you all mean to them in things that we brought, and the gifts that we brought, and the greetings that we brought, the medical supplies, the clothes that the C4C has done for them, books that were given for the teachers to share with the classes. But really, most of all, your friendship, your love, your prayers is what they covet the most, and they're so very grateful. So thank you for joining us in this, and we'll let Pete tell the fun part. Thank you.
All right. Well, good morning. And as Di said, thank you so much for your prayers, your support. It's just an awesome thing. We had a great trip. Praise God that we had no travel issues, no sickness. Everything went very, very well. It was great to see the work of the mission that's gone on in these past 7 or 8 years. Not to belabor things, we'll just kind of go through. This is the church in Go-Go, and as I put selected pictures for these slides, I teared up almost every time I saw this, because in 2016, the church there was just a mud hut building with a thatched roof that we had hoped to put a metal roof on to start a feeding center, and the builder said, that building's going to collapse, so you cannot put a metal roof on it. And I remember clearly, when I first met Daniel, and Diane and I started praying about this and saying to God, what can we possibly do from here? We don't know anything about Africa. We've never heard of Malawi, and we don't know anything about orphan care. God just started to open windows and doors. It as Diane said, only God could have made this happen. I had no interest ever in setting foot on the African continent. Not that it's not beautiful, but it just wasn't in my view. And so Pastor John was the only one that knew about this at the time, and he encouraged me to share with the church. We had said, we'll send letters out and see if we can raise support to family, friends, and whoever. And John encouraged us to share what we felt God was calling us to with the church. So at a quarterly business meeting, which I just thought today, we have to get one of those on the schedule. Note to self. We mentioned it, and we told people, for the first time where we felt the Lord was leading, and this church is just amazing. And we said our first step was to try to build a new church there to act as not only a church, but a feeding center. At the time, it was just going to be a feeding center. And Ken Hathaway, and we said, we're not asking you for funds. We're just making you aware of what we feel the Lord has called us to. And Kenny said, what's the cost? And We had a quote at the time, and he said, well, I make a motion that we start off with providing half of the funding for the new church. And a vote was taken, and that was it. It's a great thing about a small church that you can just move when God calls you to move. You don't need a committee. It's the same thing with this ministry, how we're blessed. So when I see this picture of this beautiful building and how the church family has tripled really in those years, that's our home church in Malawi. And we couldn't feel more at home with them. Feel free to chime in anytime you'd like. But I'll just keep rolling. So this was after our church service there in Gogo. So the Feeding and Learning Center is going along very well. About 220 children a day are fed there. Also, some of the elderly who are able to make it to the center from their homes are fed there afterwards. The cooks do a fantastic job. We have 20 women that volunteer to cook. We do provide them with gifts every other month, just a small show of appreciation. So the little ones are inside, cute as can be. I went the wrong way. And so the cooks get there at 6 o'clock in the morning. They're in teams of 4, so each group has one day of the week, Monday through Friday. And breakfast is ready to be served at about 10 o'clock. And the school starts at 8, runs from 8 to noon. So the teachers keep the kids busy, and the cooks are preparing the food. It's not an issue, but one thing that happens is when they ring the bell for dinner, quite a few kids from the local primary school, the government primary school, leave school and come because they're hungry and they want a meal. So we get kids that come. It's only kind of across the road. I don't know how far, maybe an eighth of a mile, quarter of a mile. I have to keep doing this. So this is how the ladies prepare food in the morning, cook over open fires. While we were there, we were able to purchase an extra large pot for them, which they asked for, make it a little easier for them. And on the menu this day was fish, which there's not fish close to Gogo, so that's purchased. And also, once or twice a week, they have fruit, either bananas or mangoes, again, that are purchased and brought in because they're not grown close to Gogo. So fish maize, which is sima, it's like a paste that they eat. It's a staple of the area. Soya pieces, that was on the menu this morning for the kids, and it's a good and nutritious meal. So that's great. Anything else about that? Chime right in. So Chittiamanga is the local primary school. It's a government primary school. It's 1,300 kids.
Yep.
Yeah, and
1,444.
1,444. She's the detail person. Children. We've done work with them before. We hired a local tailor to build to make uniforms for children in the past. It's a typical primary school in Malawi. A lot of kids start off there. Very few finish. Because of various reasons. Poverty is really the reason. Either they don't have good clothing to wear, they're hungry, so it's tough to get through a day on an empty stomach. We've come through, as you all know, you've been praying a couple of years of either flooding or drought and famine. So in the last few months, people have been eating every second day or some every third day. Thankfully, the mission has been able to provide in each budget for the past year additional food for over 200 families to get them through this period for the hungriest of them. But it's a challenge in these schools. The level 2 class, which is second grade, 364 kids in that class.
2 teachers.
2 teachers. So teachers here want to talk about teacher-student ratios. The average in the country is about 110 students to a teacher. In the rural areas like this, it's much worse. It's harder to get teachers to go there. The school has no desks, so the kids sit on the floor. The library is empty. There are no books. It's a challenge. It's a very big challenge for the teachers also. We always have the opportunity to talk to the students, talk to the staff. On the right-hand side is the teacher that we're talking to. Behind him is the school headmaster. And we just feel badly for the teachers because they're doing the best that they can. And they have no resources. And this man is a very humble man. He will not even make eye contact with you. It's, and so we try to encourage them and tell them how thankful we are for the work they're doing with these children under extreme circumstances. We try to encourage them. We always ask when we go places, what are your biggest needs? And at the school, it was notebooks and pens for kids. And the fact that, there's no electricity in this school. And they have to we were there during the end of the second term, so they were giving tests to kids. It's just paper. But they're only given the master test by the government. They have to make copies for these 1,400 kids. And they have no way to do that. So the teachers have to take the test to a local trading center, which someone might have electricity and a copier or a printer, and print out all these copies. Teachers have to pay this. And the teachers are terribly underpaid to begin with. So again, because of the beauty of the mission and the fact that you all trust us to make decisions, those two areas we're addressing. So we've got quotes for pens and notebooks for the kids, and we've got quotes for printer and copy machine. So that printer will be kept in Daniel's house, which is also our office for the mission. He has a small solar panel. We have a laptop there. So, and his Go-Go Village is very close to this school. So the teachers will just be able to go to his house and have access to printed material. So, God He provides. He provides. The Dolo Health Center, you guys may remember from our last trip, we visited there also. Last time, the big thing for them was there are 13 beds in this health center. It serves 45,000 people from 15 or 20 villages. It's really, at the time we were there last time, it was empty because the nurse was away for a few weeks. This time it was chock full of people, and there were more staff there. But so the last time we purchased, meaning the mission, 13 mattresses because all the beds were just springs. There were no mattresses on these beds. So people would just lay on springs. This time, that's myself, Daniel, the director of the health center, and Diane in that picture. Again, we asked, what are your biggest needs? And he talked about delivery beds for women. The picture on the left is a delivery bed for women. They deliver 40 to 50 children a month at this health center, and all the beds are rusted right through the middle, under the mattresses. It's shocking to us. It's shocking. This is a government healthcare facility. So again, we asked the price of new ones. The director got us 4 quotes, and so we're purchasing 2 new ones. He said that was satisfactory for what they needed. So we'll be purchasing 2 new delivery beds. The head and the feet go up and down for...
The foot of the bed actually breaks away so that...
Yeah, okay.
Never had a baby.
I've never had a baby. And,
Gets right out of the way.
And to be honest with you, I don't remember much from when you had a baby. But anyway. So, and then the other issue was, and you can't see it's behind us in this photo, is the incinerator, because they have to burn all of their medical waste. And the incinerator is not functioning, so he said it's a problem that dogs get in there and pull out this medical waste. It's very unsanitary. Actually, you may be surprised, but in this health center, there's no running water. The pump is outside, so they have to bring buckets of water in for, cleaning up after a delivery of a child. And this is just the reality. So we're getting quotes. He's getting prices together on what it would cost to get the incinerator repaired. Yeah. So church visits are a big part. We visited 4 churches. It's a real joy. The full church service while we were there was at Go-Go, and the church services last 3 hours. So No complaining here, people. No complaining. But they're very joyous occasions. The other churches had special services because we were there. I had the privilege of preaching at all of them. Daniel translated for me. It's tough because Daniel is the only one in the village that speaks English fluently. So everything has to go through him, or we had another fellow that you'll see traveling with us who also was able to translate for us. But as I told Norma the first time she came up for a VBS, and she was very concerned about her ability to speak English. You don't just speak with words, you know? And so it's as though you're speaking when you're just being with people sometime. So the church services were fantastic. This is another church. The church on the right, they don't have a building. They meet under a tree. This was a very remote village. This is the village that had, if you didn't hear, had never had a vehicle get to it. No one in the village had ever seen white people before. It was very remote, but we were very well received. They meet under a tree, so in the rainy season, you know, they can get 2, 3, 4 inches of rain in an afternoon there. So they can't meet in the rainy season.
So just as an aside, as we're traveling along, you all have, right, kids punch buggy, right? You see a VW on the punch buggy, the kids hit. What you hear is Azunga, and it's because they've never seen a white person. And Pete, he's in the front seat, and they're like, Azunga, Azunga. And it's
come
like,
running
wow,
out.
we've seen a white person.
Yeah. I could run for president there. I mean, you just wave, and if it's like, I said that to Chico, and he's like, no, because the president doesn't go to areas like this. Their campaigns. Anyway, yeah, it is very funny. We tried, when we were in Zamba in the north, we were visiting Passion Center for Children, a fantastic ministry. And we were going to some house visits there. This is after we left Gogo, and they're just these paths through these huge cornfields, and you can't see anything, and then there'll be a path to a house. And Stephen, who was driving us, who works for them, couldn't remember exactly where this house was, so we stopped. And these 2 little kids came out. They saw the big Azunga in the front of the van. They ran back, and the father comes charging out and talking to Stephen to give him directions. And then one of the kids got word to the mother, and she was, mostly people are very skinny in Gogo. She was the exception. She was a good-sized woman, and she couldn't get out there fast enough. She was breaking speed records to get out. And she wanted to get on the bike and not just tell us where this house was. We want to show you how to get to where you're going, but yeah, it's funny. This is that church without a tree, and just gives you an idea of their singing. I want to say before this morning, the singing. I sit back there. Sometimes you see me sing along, sometimes not. I wasn't mostly this morning because it sounded so beautiful what was coming out of this congregation this morning. It was beautiful to hear. But it is different in Gogo. Not that they don't sing, or in Malawi, but this is just that old timer loved to dance. But anyway, so that was our the start of our visit there. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So home visits, we do a lot of walking there for farm visits and home visits. You're just walking through paths. There's a little video clip coming up, and we say to each other, well, you've heard me say before, the U.S. government couldn't find us right now. We have no idea where we are. We're just following along, and just 2 little specks on the map. And but as we've said before, absolutely not a concern in the world. God is just amazing. It's an amazing thing about our faith that you can be so far from home with people that live so differently and feel so at home, feel so embraced and so at home. So we do these home visits. We visit folks that have issues, either health issues. One of the women was HIV positive with a family, which is not uncommon. Daniel kind of whispered that to us ahead of time because it's against the law to publicly say if someone is positive. But he just, thought we should know, and it was fine. Great lesson for me from my wife through the years, and she learned it from her grandmother. is how important physical touch is. When she would visit her grandmother in the nursing home, Di always, held her grandmother's hand and talked to her, looked right into her face, and her grandmother remarked to her that when you get old and frail, people they're afraid to touch you, and how much it means to people. And we're both huggers, and so we really do take people by the hand and look into their eyes, even though we're speaking to them through an interpreter. And that's the love of Christ coming through. That's what Jesus loved. He touched everybody. He physically touched people that others wouldn't teach. So it's a good lesson for all of us. Anyway, it's going to be a short sermon, or your people are going to be tired by the time I get to it. So on the left there, that's a family that has two albino little girls. And some of you may recall from newsletters, I saw the picture of the oldest one. Daniel sends me pictures basically every day, pictures and videos. And I thought I saw a white girl with all the kids in Go-Go. And I said, Daniel, is there a white girl in Go-Go? And he said, no, Dad, she's has albinism. And I said, tell me her story. So he told me that he sent a teacher each morning to pick her up for school because it's not safe to have albinism in Malawi. Witchcraft is prevalent, and people are often killed because of being albino. So he would send a teacher to pick her up and a teacher to bring her home. And, we just asked, what are the family's needs? And he said, well, they could stand to have a secure house. Their house was like the one on the right, that other family, just a hut. But these children need to be protected. So we said, okay, let's build them a secure house. So that's their house. The door's locked. There are bars on the windows. It was the most awesome thing. This woman did not belong to Daniel's church. And her daughter came to the Feeding and Learning Center. And she could not understand why this church, us and the Go-Go church, because people in Go-Go did all the work, were building her a house. And, through Daniel always, we say, this comes from God. This is not coming from us. This is not coming from us. This is coming from God. And, they do attend Daniel's church now, but it was just awesome for us to see the church there, hand this church over to this family, knowing it's better than any of the houses that they live in themselves. They don't live in brick houses with metal roofs. Anyway. It's a hard life in Go-Go. Sometimes we feel bad about taking photos, but Daniel encourages to, and things we don't like to see sometimes, but it's reality. So the child on the left is disabled. There are no social services there. There's no welfare system. If you have no food, you have no food. If you have a disabled child, there is nowhere for you to take that child for care or treatment. So this mom had taken her child to the health center and just told that, I don't know, what did they say about it?
They said that it was from malnutrition,
yeah,
and that her bones were underdeveloped, and that sort of,
yeah,
any luck that eventually her bones would strengthen.
Yeah, and that's what they say.
I couldn't help this morning when Rodney was praying. He said that trials are a blessing, and it brought me instantly to our home visits, and to think the trials that these people endure are, it's a little hard to be there in person and to see it. Like Peter said, Daniel encouraged, we always asked if we could take pictures just out of respect. And people, always, that was fine. And we would pray with each of the families as we were leaving. We were able to give them a small monetary gift to each of the families that we visited. And it really struck me this morning when Rodney was praying that it's very difficult for me to look through that perspective of trials being a blessing, be it for us here at home when we're going through them, for people around the world. But it is true. There's always a lesson meant for us from the Lord. And it was great for me to hear it. It's wonderful for me to see it and to know that I need to continue to grow in my faith so that it's quicker for me to be able to nod my head and say, Rodney, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. The woman on the right is very typical for an old widow. You can't really see there. Her legs are so skinny. She was actually afraid of, I don't know about us, but she was afraid of me, so she kind of scooted around the corner. She'd probably never seen a white person. She was deaf, and she's cared for by her grandson there, who is mentally disabled to some degree. I did back off, and she came back around so I could pray. She did not hear my prayers. In fact, she spoke loudly through my prayer because she's deaf. But anyway, so yeah, as I said, we are able to give everyone we visit just a gift. It may be enough for a week's worth of food. One thing that's on our hearts is the elderly here, and we're trying to incorporate for the youth of the church some way for them to develop a team to do acts of service for the elderly. The elderly are often kind of pushed aside, and people don't have enough to feed themselves, so they don't have anything to share. It's not that they don't have a heart for it. The home on the left was a widow's home we went to visit, but she was not there. I think she was at the feeding center. And Daniel mentioned that she sleeps, as is common, she has a mosquito net. Her home was damaged in flooding earlier this year. She sleeps on top of her mosquito net. That's the only thing between her and the ground. Most people a lot of people have reed mats. There's no cushion to them. But so actually the Vanonis want to take on this project of raising support because the reed mats are people make them in the village. And they cost maybe $4. But again, I said, Daniel, why doesn't she have? She said, because she didn't have $4. So the Vanonis want to take on raising support. They wanted something. I said, well, listen, we just met these people today, and we talked to your church, and maybe raise the support for 50 or 100 mats for the elderly. Behind you is the little tiny clip of this woman who is making baskets in front of her home.
If I hadn't seen her do it with my own hands, I never would have believed it.
She may be frail, but her hands are got to be strong. You
should take a peek at this after. It was a gift from her. We prayed with her, and she said to her grandson, said something, and he went in the house and came out with this basket that she had made to give to us as a gift.
Yeah.
And it's exquisite. And she's just sitting there
working away. Yeah. So this is Witness Godfrey, and the picture on the left, you may recall, I think it was in our first newsletter, and that picture was taken the first day the feeding center opened in 2018 when we were there. And I was just sitting on the floor taking pictures of kids, and it was the first day they'd ever eaten with a spoon, and it was just porridge at the time, and I thought it was a great shot for me of Witness. And so I asked Daniel about her, and she was 4 or 5 at the time. And then he sent me the picture on the right a few days later, or weeks later, and told me her story. And her story was that she was the caregiver at 4 or 5 years old for her 2 grandparents. She lived with them. Her parents were not around. I don't know if they died or what. Her grandfather is blind, was blind, and her grandmother on the right, quite frail. And so it was her job to find food, sweep out the house, fetch water, firewood to cook at that young age. Again, not uncommon. So about a month or 2 ago, Daniel sent me the photo on the left and said to me, do you know who that is? I said, no. He said, that's Witness. She's 12 now. And he was walking home from his farm and saw her working on her little farm, took that picture for me. And I said to him, we'd like to meet Witness and her grandparents when we arrive. We'd like them to be included in the visitation. And the day before we arrived in Gogo, Witness's grandfather died. So when we arrived, actually, at the village right next to Gogo, the funeral was going on. We did not want to intrude, but we were brought there. We greeted the village headman and then left, so we did not stay for the funeral. But we did visit their home a few days later and was able to pray with the grandmother and to chat through Daniel with Witness. But she's doing a great job caring for her. She has done a great job caring for her elderly grandparents. And we just pray God's blessing on her. Farm visits. We visit a lot of Farming God's Way farms, some non-Farming God's Way farms. The young woman on the left didn't smile at first for the photo. And when I said to Daniel, ask her if she'll smile. Boy, she lit up the cornfield there. And she's a Farming God's Way farmer. She has a small little patch that she's hoping to raise food for her family. I don't know the husband's situation there. Um, but anyway, she's doing her best, and she's doing a great job farming God's way. On the right is Alex Stephen Bongo. He's a pastor, he's a farmer. He and Daniel are both farming God's way trainers. He's also a tailor and a school teacher. He made our first uniforms for the nursery school. Great young guy, young pastor, and hard worker, very smart. And in this picture, some of the farms where he's teaching drip irrigation for vegetables in small patches. And so the buckets, they fill, obviously you have to carry water there because there's no irrigation. And fill your buckets and use drip irrigation to waste as little as possible. They're doing great. When we visit the farms, just like the villages, this is just a typical day. Thankfully, you know, we were originally supposed to go in November. It was like 110, 115 degrees. It's cool season there now, so it was just in the low 90s. But we appreciate the 15-degree difference. So this is, you know, this is how we get from spot to spot, is those paths. It's been the rainy season, so it's green. There's no grass, but that's green brush. That's actually the chief walking in front of me, just to give you an idea what it's like. We walk, we'll just keep on walking. And how many here have water bottles? Everybody. Hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. You don't see a water bottle, and they'll be working in 115-degree heat for 6 or 7 hours with not water anywhere near them. How their bodies have acclimated, I have no idea. But it's just a phenomenon. That how, anyway, we had bottles of water with us, but we didn't offer to share, and they didn't ask. So the main crops are maize. This is on the left. This is the mission farm of Go-Go Village, which is our farmers there are doing great. Our security guards are doing great. Our security guard, one of them is a very tall man. I should put a picture with a beret, and he had his baton. And he met us at the village, stood at attention, saluted me. It's like, I felt like...
very proud of his job.
But anyway, but they do a great job. They obviously, we have a well and a pump there, so they have to protect that. They also, which I didn't know, we learned this time, they guard against monkeys, our security guards, because this farm is near the woods and monkeys come in and destroy a lot. So they're chasing off monkeys also. But the farmers there are doing great work. So, and we're praying for good harvest. Some of the crops are better than others. It's a big farm, so they can't put God's blanket on everything, but anyway. So maize, sorghum, millet, cotton, and sesame. Cotton and sesame are cash crops. Also cassava, which we ate. They pulled up the big roots of that for us, the starch. Okay, then another big part of our whole thing is just building relationships. And the picture on the left is Brenda and her little boy Brenda in 2018. Brenda was 18 at the time, and Ben was 3. She had him when she was 15. It was very common. And when we met and sat with them on the first visit, Brenda didn't even look at us, really, and he had never walked at 3 years old. And we felt that she felt like she would have to carry this child her whole life. And then the feeding center opened, and 2 or 3 months later, Daniel sent me a little video clip of a little boy walking around the village. He said, "You know who that is?" I said, "No." He said, "That's Ben." I was like, wow. It was just lack of nutrition were its issues. And that's them now. Ben's 10. When we visited Chittimanga Primary School, he fought his way through the crowds to get up to say hello to us when we were there. And yeah, it was a different visit in that our first visit, they didn't know what to make of us because things were just starting. And now it was like going home. And Dai is very popular with the young people. And it was sweet when we were doing one of those walks, the second to last day, the day I was saying to God, "Are you calling us here full time?" I hope not. And I don't think so. But Brenda said through Chico, our translator, you know, that they didn't want us to leave. And she said that when they walk with us, they feel like they're walking with their mother and father, which is just very touching because Brenda, her dad died when she was an infant, and I don't think she had much contact with her mother. So it's just, again, we can't speak to her. I would ask her simple questions in English, and she would say, Bishop, help me. And Daniel would translate. But anyway, So it was great. This little girl, she leads the Sunday school choir, and that's Daniel's sister, Lindley, who leads the adult choir. And then this is the chief's house on the left. We had a visit with him. He's the whole area is Masanduco. There's actually one of the villages is named Masanduco. Spent a lot of time, again, talking with him. He really explained the tribal system to me and how it all works. So he's the chief of 5 villages, and each village has a headman, and he's the group village headman. After the church service on Sunday, he presented us with gifts. Believe it or not, Diane managed to pack that big rug into our Barbara Sherman's duffel bag that she gave us and got it back. Those hats for smaller heads than ours, and a couple of baskets, and a goat so that is a huge honor. And he had said to me, you can take it home with you, you can cut it up for the meat and bring that home with you. And I said to Diane after, how do I tell him that this is not possible? And we learned a great lesson from him, and we said, could we donate this to the church to have for their Easter meal? And he said, when someone gives you a gift, it is yours. It's no longer mine. So whatever you choose to do with it. And so that's what we did. This is Diane with his wife and 2 youngest daughters. He has 2 older children that are away, one at trade school and one at another school. We did visit some secondary schools. The mission does pay. Secondary school is not free, which is high school in Malawi. It's not very expensive. It's about $30 or $40 a month. But kids cannot afford it. Very, very few people. Maybe 10% of the eligible population goes to high school. So we did visit, and some of the kids. Actually, the picture on the right is Daniel's daughter goes to a boarding school. We don't pay her fees. He pays her fees, but we did stop and see Dorcas, visit her. So these are our travel companions, Chico on the left, and McPherson, a good Scotsman, on the right. And he was our driver. The first time we went, we just rented a van, which is not Avis. You give someone money, they give you their van, and you tell them when you'll bring it back. But they drive on the other side of the road there, and I like to see things, so it's stressful driving because the main highway from north to south through the whole country is a 2-lane road, like this lane here. And there are a lot of people walking right alongside that road or riding bikes. So
or herding cattle.
Or herding cattle. You're always stopping for goats and cattle. Young boys are herders, so they move cattle, and they're walking right down the middle of the highway. Anyway, so we were thankful that we had McPherson. He got us to places I would have never attempted to take a van. And Chico was from Kondonani Children's Village. He was the oldest child when he was in high school when we were there, and he was Annie's first college university graduate, and we've kept in touch. I never lose someone's contact. If I meet you once, I always believe God's got a reason for it. So we invited him to travel with us, and he's going to be a great asset to help us, and it was good for him to translate. So this was our mode of transportation with McPherson. It's a 10-passenger van, and when we would leave Gogo to go to visit other churches, there were 24 of us in this van. It was our clown car. It was a ton of fun to hear them all gabbing. They never ride in vehicles, so anyone that could possibly squeeze in that vehicle is in there. There are obviously no vehicles in any of these villages, very few bicycles. And so this is, there are no roads when you get off the main road. And Daniel is directing the driver this path, that path, and this is 30 kilometers from Gogo, so how he knows, I don't know. And Diane mentioned on this trip, she said, was the van making those creaking sounds when we started? And I said, I don't think so, but it was really stressed.
But there were a few times we had to stop. You could see the riverbed on the left that is dry, but we had to, everybody out. It was like a circus, like clowns out of the car.
So he could get through
to lessen the weight so he could not bottom out.
And the front bumper dragging, the back bumper dragging.
McPherson was our hero.
He was fantastic. And this is, Diane took a little video. It's not everybody, but most of us piling out of the clown car. They just kept coming.
Just kept coming.
And coming. I swear they were coming in through a door on the other side.
I don't know where they all were.
And so just a couple of songs. Wow, it's going to be a short sermon. You might want to, yeah, Smitty's pointing at that clock. Like your style. But some happy notes to end with, and it's just the joy. This is the Sunday school choir. The little girl that leads them is saw in a picture with Diane. They sing with such joy. Even the little kids, I don't know how they learn to harmonize, but they know how to harmonize. So. We're singing praise of the Lord. Songs of praise. The Sunday school teacher. Isn't that a beautiful church? So simple, but so beautiful. And then, and this is how church service begins, with singing, and more people come until the point where you saw that first picture. And, you know, I always ask Daniel, I sent him this video and said, what are the words of the song? Because you want to know what they're singing. He said, well, actually, Dad, these are two songs that you've recorded. The end of one, it says, the first one says that Jesus is in my heart. That's why I can joyfully sing today. In the past, I failed God many times due to my sinful life. But since Jesus is in me, I can joyfully sing today. The second song says, my hope is built on Jesus Christ. I never need and trust any other hope, but I just lean on Jesus only. I have stood firm in believing Jesus Christ, for he is the rock of my life. So, you can't sit still. I'm not a dancer, but you can't sit still. That's a group of pastors on the right-hand side. I think there were 15 of them came that day. Anyway, and then this was the last night of our trip up in Zamba. Daniel and Teresa and their two youngest daughters traveled with us, Princess and that's little Ruth, who Diane had the honor of naming. Daniel asked Diane to name, and she named her after Ruth Goesdome. So that's little Ruth. He has two older daughters. Daniel, and actually a son who would have been his fourth born that only lived for a day, unfortunately. He sent me, I still have the picture of that little boy on my phone. He was so happy. And then the next day we heard that the little guy had passed away. But anyhow, so, and in their home, I don't have a picture of their home here, but it's 3 rooms. And this is a brick home that we built them. It also serves as storage for the grains for the feeding center. We need a secure place for that. And the office. And there are 17 living in that 3-room little house. Their own children, 3 of his brother's children, his sister-in-law passed away, and they took their children on, and then some other orphans from the village. Daniel has a huge heart, just a huge heart, and just eagerness to serve and make people's life. And it's not easy what we ask him to do, because people know that the work that he's doing, and everyone has need. So we always pray, especially for him and his safety, and but he's a very humble leader. Anyway, so that's what we have for that. Oh yes, As I said, I never lose a contact. When we flew into Blantyre, Malawi, there were only 20 of us on the plane. The only plane at the airport when we arrived, and we were on the only plane leaving when we left. And I met a man as we were in the line for immigration, and he asked what we were doing, where we were going. I told him, and he was a Malawian coming back, I forget from somewhere. And he had an NGO, he said, in the middle region of the country, and asked if he could have my phone number, WhatsApp number. So I said, sure. And then when we were in Zambia, he contacted and said he wanted to come meet with us. And I didn't know this guy. And so Stephen and Daniel both were concerned. We were staying in a house owned by Passion Center. They said, you don't know this guy. So anyway, so we did meet him. He drove through, and Stephen was like, why is he coming? I said, I don't know. So Stephen talked to him. He said, and he was only coming to see us, 3.5-hour drive. And he had some gifts for us, he said. So we met him at a little burger place in the city. We didn't eat there, but just met with him. And he's the pastor, and he and Daniel ended up knowing the same people, but his NGO drills, one of the things they do is drill boreholes, drill wells. So it's a good contact to have. He'll give us some pricing. Also, just FYI, it didn't make this, but we're very blessed that we'll be able to, the mission, drill 2 more boreholes, 2 more wells for 2 villages that don't have water. But anyway, and some of the gifts he gave us, one was the shirt for me, gave us coffee, and I don't know what else. Anyway, but that shirt didn't fit me. But I said to Daniel, it might fit you. And man, he was like, yeah. Doesn't that look great on him? So anyway, we went out to dinner that night, and Daniel wore that shirt. It was great. Anyway, so that's it. Finished. Oh, you're supposed to read. I'll find a way to condense this, but Diane's going to read these.
Well, thank you for letting us share that with you, because it's a
Oh, the kids are dismissed.
great story to tell. And I'm coming as soon as I finish reading.
Well, invited.
Are invited. So Pete has asked me to read this morning from the book of James. I'm reading from James chapter 2, verses 14 and 17. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. In James chapter 1, verse 26 and 27, those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world.
Thank you. Don't forget to shut your mic off.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
They'll hear you snoring. Okay, it's only 16 pages, page a minute. Now, so in seriousness, I will try to just cut through a lot of stuff. So we've been celebrating Easter, and we've been leading up to it, Caleb and Aubrey, for Easter. And it's. I was thinking about it, and Easter is kind of, in a way, the beginning of a new year for us. Because with the ascension, everything is secured that we have. So sometimes we think of Christmas or New Year's Day as the beginning of a new year, but I think in a real sense for believers, you could say it starts. Preaching is useless, and so is your faith. But we who are believers, we know Christ is raised, and so we don't need to fear death or what comes after death. So we know our salvation is secure, but we're still here. We're still here on this earth, and we can't coast while we're here. We're still called into acts of service. We're called to obedience. In the book of James, Well, the question is, how do we know where we stand? And James kind of helps us with the end just read. The Bible teaches that God doesn't tempt anyone. He can't be tempted, neither does he tempt. But it's very clear that he does test us. And we're tested often. In the book of James, we see that very clearly. But it's not only in James. Peter and Paul talk about us examining ourselves to see where we stand in our faith, to see if it's true, if it's real. So this is a little quiz today. We all love taking quizzes, I'm sure. So you can just thank me for taking us from the joyous celebrations of last week and bringing you right down to reality. It's all on me for this. So James, he's writing as a pastor and a teacher, and he's writing with authority, right? It's widely agreed upon that James is the half-brother of Jesus. He had a lot of authority in the new church. So as a teacher, though, what makes a teacher a good teacher? I mean, are there any teachers in your life that you look back on and say, those were good teachers for me? They meant a lot to me. There are two I can think of from high school. Actually, three teachers. I don't remember a lot of teachers. And there are three I remember. One because she said something that wasn't very nice to me, although it was probably deserved. But the other two are a man, Sid Cohen, an English teacher. He usually taught honors level classes, but for some reason, either talked them into or he signed the wrong, or funny. They were neither of the two. But they didn't allow you to just coast and just graduate. Only time I ever made the honor roll was because Sid Cohen really pushed me as an English teacher to be better than I wanted or felt I needed to be. Paul Gibbons was a tough man, as like I said, this Navy vet. He sat us down every time report cards were handed out, and he would go at our desks. We had him for 3 periods a day because it was vocational school. He'd look at your report card, and if he didn't think it looked good, he'd whack the back of your head and say, "Are you an idiot?" Kind things like that. And you can do better than this. And that was back in the day when the teacher could swat you in the back of the head. And actually, he hated if you had your hands in your pockets. Oof, I better take those out. He would whack you for that and say unkind things. But what made those great teachers for me is you knew they cared. They cared enough to push you. And that's what James does in his writing. He cares enough about the readers of his letter and us today to push us. He challenges us with these tests and quizzes. But, it's not only James that does that. As I said, Peter and Paul did it, and Paul wrote, we need to examine ourselves to be sure we are in the faith. What do you mean, be sure I'm in the faith? Well, are you living in such a way that's in accordance with God's will for you? It's easy to proclaim faith, and we baptize people based on their proclamation of faith, not as assurance of salvation, because it's only they know if it's true, them and God, if what they proclaim is true. We've probably all seen people that have been baptized at one point or another and been on fire for the Lord, and then something seemed to happen and they went off the rails and you never saw or heard from them again. You see how they're living and you're like, how can they be in the faith? So this morning, James, we're going to focus on James. And I love James. I used to think it was like the Proverbs of the New Testament, and it kind of is. But really, it reads more as like a pastor's sermon notes as he goes along. You think there's no theme to it, but there's definitely a theme to it. And if you think of it that way, it's good. And most of you know that the verse that Diane, the first one Diane read, about what good is it if you see a brother or sister in need and you wish them well, send them on their way, but don't do anything for their physical needs. That is the verse that God convicted me. When I met Daniel in 2016, I was studying the book of James with Gene Pickett, and that verse haunted me for weeks. But I kept saying, God, what is it you want from me? We can't do anything. And God kept saying, do you trust me? There are times when these verses seem to be in conflict with the teachings of Paul. Ephesians 2:8-9 says, for it's by grace you've been saved through faith, right? And this is not by works, It's not of yourselves, it's the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. So clearly we're saved by faith, not by our works. So why does James say, if we're not acting out our faith, then our religion is dead? Is James contradicting Paul? Well, he certainly is not. When we look at the book as a whole, verse 10 of Ephesians says what? After Paul just said that. We're God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. We're called into action. We are called into action. And earlier in chapter 1 and verse 18, James writes that God chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created. So James clearly knows that our salvation is by God's choice, who speaks to us through his word, the word of truth. So James is not contradicting Paul in any way. It's important when you study the Bible, and you read a verse, but you can't just take that verse. That's where you may start, but you got to start to back away from it. What is that chapter of the book talking about? What is that book as a whole talking about? What is the Old or New Testament talking about? And what is the Bible as a whole talking about? So it's important to not take anything out of context, and certainly not the context of the whole word. So James in these verses gives us a little quiz. It's not an exhaustive quiz. It's just 3 things that we should look at. Those who consider themselves religious and do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. And then he says, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and flawless is this: to look after widows and orphans and widows in their distress, and keep oneself from being polluted by the world. So there's 3 things there. You remember, any of you that read Pilgrim's Progress, when Christian and Hopeful entered the city of Vanity Fair, there were 3 things that made them stand out and caused the people of Vanity Fair to despise them. I don't know if you recall what they were, but it was their speech, the way they spoke, what they said. It was their clothing, the fact that they just looked different. And it was the fact that they were not interested in anything that was for sale in Vanity Fair. They kept to themselves. They spoke the word of God. In Vanity Fair, we all live in Vanity Fair, even people in Malawi, but especially here. Vanity Fair is where every kind of sin is sold, and where things that can even be good on their own, your job, your family, your health, all of these things, there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But if those things become your God, then there is a problem with that. And that's what Vanity Fair was all about. It was this place where you were tempted by all kinds of things, and not just tempted by them, but tempted to put them high up in your life. And Christian and Hopeful were not interested in that, and Hopeful ends up getting martyred because he refuses to give up his faith. I don't know where I am because I just ran way ahead. So we'll just go here. So that kind of leads us to these 3 parts of this quiz. So just 3 quickly. Hopefully you don't leave here saying, well, that was pointless. But there's always that option. Right at the start for us to think about, what is he talking about when he says religion? Because people use that word in our culture all the time. But what does it mean to different people? So I kind of tried to dig into that, and theologian Henry Alford's definition made the most sense to me and he was specifically talking about the Greek that James used in these 2 verses. And his definition was a relationship to God rooted in the heart and shaping the life. Religion is thus a comprehensive word for the specific ways a heart relationship to God is expressed in our lives. All right? A relationship to God rooted in the heart and shaping the life. And religion is thus a comprehensive word for the specific ways a heart relationship to God is expressed in our lives. So remember, James isn't saying that these 3 areas of this test are exhaustive. He couldn't be, because he doesn't mention anything about staying in the Word, reading the Word. He doesn't mention anything about us gathering together. Again, don't take this out of the context of his general teaching and the teaching of the Bible. But he is saying that take this quiz, and if you don't do very well on it, you need to re-examine where you stand with the Lord. Because we're trying to grow in Christ-likeness, right? And we need to test ourselves. Am I growing in Christ-likeness? So the first part, the tongue, has to do with our hearts. And the second and third parts have to do with the attributes of God. So why does James start with the tongue? Where does it come from? Well, in relation to the book, it links us back to verse 18, where he says that God gives us birth through his word of truth. God spoke his word. So what comes out of the mouth is critically important. Jesus talked about this in Matthew 15. His little argument, one of them with the Pharisees and the leaders, about eating unclean food. He said, this is Jesus' words, what goes into someone's mouth does not defile them, but what comes out of their mouth, that is what defiles them. Don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out of the body? But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what defile a person. But eating with unwashed hands does not defile a person. So Jesus spoke about this too, that we need to be careful about what comes out of our mouths. And it's very true. The mouth is a window to our hearts. And our hearts are where our true selves are, right? If we are to grow in Christness, we need to learn to harness our tongues. Later on, James talks about, the rudder of a ship being so small, just like our tongues, but it can direct the way that the ship goes, or a big fire being started by a small spark. So what if you're pretty good about not saying things? You're a fairly quiet person, and you're pretty good at harnessing that tongue. Are you feeling like I'm pretty good at this part of the test? I think them, but I don't say them out loud. So what's the difference other than you're moving your mouth and air is coming out of your lungs, right? So when you turn on the TV news and there's something political that you don't agree with, what are the first thoughts or words that come out of your mouth, right? If you feel like you're being cheated by the system, any system, what are the first thoughts or words that come out of your mouth? If you're still feeling pretty good, how about when you're driving? If you drive, you fail. Because someone cuts you off, someone doesn't use their directional. Joe does it all the time, and then he has the Jesus loves you sticker on the back of his car. But the fish. Anyway, so we need to be very careful. In James 3:9, he says, with the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. Did that clock die, Smitty, or you just shut it off? He shut it off. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt flow from the same spring, right? So those are difficult words for us to hear. All right, let's jump ahead. We need 2 and 3, Dawn says, yeah. So part 2 is a test of our compassion or a lack thereof. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless as this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress. All right, why would James include this in the test? In verse 18, James wrote, God's compassion towards us, God's compassion towards us. He chose to give us birth through the word, that we may be a kind of first fruits of all he created. So to start with, God had compassion on us. So are we not to have compassion on others? God is our role model, right? We're not to follow other men, not to follow other people on this earth. They'll only disappoint us. But God and his word will not. And if you want to hear God's heart, you read his word. And if you have a concordance, it's the best tool you can use other than the Bible. Just do a word search on some of these. And just some of these verses, Deuteronomy 26:12, when you have finished setting aside 1/10 of all your produce in the 3rd year, the year of the tithe, you shall give it to the Levite, the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow, so that they may eat in your towns and be satisfied. Psalms has a bunch of them, 68:5. A father to the fatherless, a defender of widows is God in his holy dwelling. 82:3. Defend the weak and the fatherless, uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. And when John sent one of his disciples to see if Jesus was the Messiah, Jesus said, tell him the blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. God has a heart for those who are disadvantaged. Throughout history, the poor have responded to the mercy and grace of Jesus much more readily than the rich. That's just the cold, hard facts. It's not to say that wealth in and of itself is a sin. The Bible speaks about many men in the Bible, great men, had great wealth. But wealth, give up all you have and follow me. And he went away sad, it said. He could not do that. He checked all the other boxes. But it's a word of caution. Giving isn't the answer. We can't buy our way into heaven. We say it all the time. God does not need our money, right? It's our actions and it's our heart that he's concerned about. So when we give, they're surprised in Malawi when I've said, we've never specifically asked anyone for money for this mission. And that is true. We send out our prayer is that God softens the hearts of people to give. And they have given abundantly to this mission because it's God that has the power and God can soften hearts. And so our prayer is that nobody gives out of a feeling of guilt or compassion, not of guilt, but that they give out of compassion, true compassion and a true care for people that are made in God's image. So it's not the giving, it's not the external, it's the internal that God is concerned about. And read Matthew 25:31-36. I was going to read it, but that clock's broken, so I won't. So quickly to part 3. The final little quiz here is to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. And so earlier on I mentioned the Vanity Fair, place where every sin known to man is traded, right? The teaching of the Bible is that we're to be in the world, right? But not of the world. Those are two very different things. It's not as easy as it might sound. We're called to go out throughout the world making disciples, proclaiming the good news. And that could be in Malawi. It could be at the Providence Rescue Mission. It could be in Narragansett right here. It could be VBS, Sunday School, Adventure Club, those kind of things. It could be in your neighborhood, being a good neighbor. And it could be in your own home or your workplace. We're all called to different places. But that's what we're called to be, in the world, but not of the world. So we're always called to go through this minefield and to somehow keep ourselves from being polluted by it. It's not an easy thing to do. So what can we do? Where do we turn? It's easy to point out the issues, but where are the answers? What gets us through these things? Well, it's the Word. The Word tells it. The Word is our guidebook for life, and that's where we are to turn to find the answers to the questions that life gives us, and to find the answers to the commands of obedience that God speaks to us through. And it's all over the Bible. I'll just, Hebrews 4:16, the writer writes, "Let us draw near with confidence to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and may find grace to help in time of need." In James 4:8, he writes, "Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Come near to God, and he will come near to you." When we draw near to God, God draws near to us. In James 1:5, he talks about wisdom, and he says, "If any of you lack wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you." Ask him. Ask God for wisdom. Pray for wisdom. Wisdom that will be used to further his kingdom. Wisdom that will be used to help you live in accordance with his will for your life. These are things we're to ask God for. The Bible says if we ask anything that's within the purview of God's will for us, it will be given to us. A great lesson I've said many times I learned from Pastor Daniel is the way he prays. He prays expecting those prayers to be answered. We very often pray hoping prayers will be answered, but not completely confident that God will do it. We temper our prayers sometimes. They pray expecting God will answer it. If what they pray is in accordance with God's will, he will answer it. God must provide for us, he says all the time, our food. And I'm like, oof, must? God doesn't really have to. Daniel's saying, if we're to receive food, God must provide it. That's what he's saying when he says that. They fully know that their lives depend on what God provides. So basically, why would James or any of the elders of this church share a message like this that's such a bummer? And it's really, messages that you will hear in this church, they're often not preached in other churches. There are churches on this Sunday that may have 10,000 people in them, and they may never be challenged to read and follow everything that the Word of God says. Thankfully, we have always had that in this church, since I've been alive anyway. Pastors who have just taught the Word and what does the Word say. And why do they do that? Because they love you. And what is more loving than the truth? Right? You can tell people what they want to hear, and they can leave church feeling great about themselves. Unfortunately, today's not going to be one of those days. But you can thank me for that. But there are times, we can't skip through Scripture and not read the hard parts. And there are some hard parts. And, thankfully for you, it only happens once or twice a year with me. But Caleb, Aubrey, anyone, Russ, anyone else that preaches, any of the elders that talk to us, there are hard parts. And we need to hear them. And we need to be called into obedience. And that's that. And it is 2:00. So I'll wrap that up. But thank you all for your support. From what I can see, our church body does pass the test. This is such a giving church community, not just to Go-Go Malawi, but through VBS, through Providence Rescue Mission. This is a body of Christ that loves its neighbors and loves each other, and it's very evident. And I just pray that will always continue in this church, and we'll listen to the tough parts of Scripture also. So thank you. I don't know what you're doing now, Will, but I do want to say, though, are we still doing that last song? Good. Listen to, as you're singing this song, I didn't know what Willie had picked today. This is a perfect song for what we're talking about. Anyway.